Hi everyone, welcome you all. So in our previous videos, we have seen more about Git, which is a local repositories we talked about. So now we will see about remote repositories, which is basically GitHub. So in the today's video, we are going to see what is GitHub and how to create a GitHub account. And then we will see how we can clone repository from GitHub. And finally, we'll see how to push the code into remote repository. And also we will see how we can use pull command to pull the code changes from the remote repository. So first of all, let us start with the what is GitHub. So we already learned about Git. So Git is basically a local repository. So we can create a local repositories, we can create a branches, we can merge the branches, we can resolve the conflicts, everything we do in our local machines. So whereas what is GitHub? So GitHub is a remote repository, we can say. So which is an hosting service for Git repositories. So we will all have Git repositories in your local machines. So once you have done your code, you will commit the changes into your local repository. At the end of the day, every developer or every tester has to push their code into the remote repository. So in the remote repository, the actual code, the final code will be available. So basically GitHub is a service which will host all our repositories, which can host all our repositories remotely. And those repository we can share within the team, or we can share the repositories globally. So GitHub is a hosting service for Git repositories. Whereas what is Git? Git is a tool which we can install on your local machine and which is acting as a local repository. Whereas the GitHub is a service which is acting as a remote repository. We can store or we can have all the repositories globally in a GitHub. So if I just look at the process earlier, what we have seen, so we all have Git repositories in the local machines. And once you have done the task, we commit those changes into local repositories. And from there, we can push the code into a remote repository. Now let us see the process, how it is going to work. So whatever files we are creating inside the project will be by default available in the working directory. So from there, we will add all those files or all those changes into staging, which is basically a virtual environment. And from the staging, we commit all the files into your local repository. So once the files are committed into your local repository, they are ready to push into remote repository. So all the team members will have access on remote repositories or global repositories, which is basically GitHub. So here, basically we do three main operations. One is git clone and git pull, git push. These are the three main activities we do. So what is git clone means? For example, in the GitHub, there is already some repositories available. Somebody is created and some files are available in the remote repository. But I don't have that repository in my local machine. So I want to get that repository in my local machines. For that, I can clone that repository. So what is cloning means? Whatever the repository which is already available in the remote repository, which we can get into your local machine. That is called git cloning process. So suppose if you already have repository in your local machine, we can push that code into remote repository. That's a different process. Now, here the project or repositories are already available in a GitHub repository. We can clone that project or clone that repository into your local machine. So where we do git clone command, we use git clone command. And git push is one more command. Suppose I already have some code committed into my local repository, which is git. From there, I want to push entire code into remote repository. So for that, we use git push command. So clone is for what? As soon as the repositories are available in my remote repositories, if I want to get the whole repository into my local machine, I can use git clone command. But already have some commits or already have done some changes in my local repository, I want to send those changes into the remote repository. For that, I can use git push command. But what is git pull command? What git pull do is, suppose I already have my local repository, I have already done some changes, but there are new changes are there in my remote repository, but those changes are not part of my local repository. Let us say one developer has created some files, added them to staging and committed those in their local directory. Let's say developer one have done this. And developer two other side, the developer two has pushed some code into global repository or remote repository, but those changes are not part of my local repository. So in those cases, we can just use git pull command. So git pull command will pull all the latest files which are already available in the remote repository into your local repository. So these are the main commands which we are going to use in the remote repository. So git clone, git pull, git push. So now we will see practically how we can use this command. So if I just see the real scenario, so in the GitHub, so normally leads will create a normal basic project and ask the team to clone that project in their local machines and ask them to develop their code. So individual engineers or testers or developers, they will implement their code, they do some changes, and finally they push the code into remote repository. But before that, they clone the repository into their local machines. Once they have updated files or once they have added a new file or modified the files, finally they push their code into the remote repositories. And here cloning means they create your local repository based on the remote repository. And push means what? Whatever code we have already done in the local repositories, we will push that code into remote repository. So pull means what? Suppose there are any new changes in the remote repository. If you want to get those changes into your local repository, then we use a pull command. So now I'll show you practically how we can do this. So first of all, let us see how to create a GitHub account. So to work with the GitHub, we need to have an account with the GitHub. So let me just show you. Just go to GitHub. This is a official website of GitHub. This is all the repositories will be available on the cloud. So I already log into this my GitHub. Let me just log out or sign out. So when you open this website first time, so you need to sign up to this particular site. So you have to provide first name, last name, and so on. And this will give you user ID and password. When you click on the sign up, so you have to provide your username and email address, password. And once you click on create account, which will send a confirmation email to your email ID. So once you confirm that link, you will get the username and password. So it is very simple and straightforward to create an account with the GitHub. So once you create your account, this is completely free. You can create. And once you get this account, GitHub account, you can just sign into this account. So I'm just providing my email address and password and just click on the sign in. And once you sign in here, you can see in the left side, you can see all the repositories you already created earlier. And these are the informations which you can show you, or you can see here, the others also can work on your repositories and follow your repository. That information will be shown here. And if you want to create a new remote repository here, we can use two options. Either we can use this new button, or you can just go here and click on the new repository. So this is the first thing we have to do. So let me just create one remote repository and have some files. So for that, what I will do is I can click on the new button here. I click on the new button, and here you have to provide the name of the repository. So let me provide some name here. I'll say test repo. Okay, test repo. So this is a repository simple I created, test repo. And if it is already available, it will show you cross mark. If it is not available, it will show you tick mark. So test repo. Every repository name should be unique. And here you can see private and public. If you want to provide a description, you can provide. This is optional. And if you want to select public or private, if I select public by default, your repository will be able to access by everybody. So because this is a completely public and global repository, so there are no restrictions are there. If anyone is having the link of your repository, they can easily access it. The next one is a private. If I select private, your repository is completely private. Only you can see your repository. Others cannot see the repository. And here initialize this repository with. So if you want to create a default files and everything, you can select this readme file or git ignore file or choose license. If you want to have these files by default with your repository, you can select them, or you can just ignore it. So let me just create a repository. So once you click on the create repository, now it is created a new remote repository. So this is the most important one. This is a remote repository URL. So if you share this URL to anyone else within the team, they can easily access your repository. So this is a most important URL which we need to have, which we have to use for cloning, pushing, everything we use this URL. So let us capture this URL in the notepad. So later I'll use it. Okay, so this is my remote repository URL. Remote repository URL. Now, so let us create some files in this repository, in the remote repository. Let us assume some developers or some testers have created some files in this repository. So I can directly create a files in this repository. So for that, what you have to do is we have to just click on this repository name, and you can find some option here to create a new file in the repository. So let me just find out. You can see here, create a new file. Get started by creating a new file. So you can just create a new file, or you can upload an existing file if you have anything. So I'm just creating a new file. Click on the new file. So here I'm giving some name called my file. So I say my file, and in this I'm writing some small text. I'll say my name is Pavan. So from Hyderabad. So I'm just writing some message here. Okay, this is a simple 2 statements I have written. So after that, you can just come down, and if you want to put some commit message, you can write it here, or else you can directly commit a new file. So you can directly commit the files into your remote repository. Currently, I have only one file. Currently, I have only one file in my remote repository. Okay. Now, this is a base project which is created, base repository which is created in my remote repository. So now my task is, I don't have this repository or don't have this project in my local machine. So let us assume as a lead, somebody has created a new project in the GitHub. So you don't have that project in your local machines. So they ask you to clone that repository and continue work on that particular repository. So in that case, you don't have any local repositories. You have to clone the repository, means you have to get one copy of the repository in your local machine. Then you have to start working on the local repository. So how we can clone that repository? So to clone the repository, what you have to do is just go and create any folder. So let me just create. So here I say git projects. So git project, I have some small folder is there. So here I want to clone my project. I don't need to create any local repository, nothing. Just I want to clone the repository from my remote repository. For that, what you have to do is just open the command prompt like this, open the bash, git bash. So git is mandatorily required. So in the git bash here, you have to execute one simple command called git clone. So git clone, and then specify the uh, GitHub URL. So here we already captured the URL. If I just want to capture the URL of this particular project or repository, you can get it from here. So this is the URL. So by taking this URL, you can just paste it over here. Okay, and within the single or double quotation. So as soon as you executed this command, which will clone the repository to your local repository. So now we can see cloning into test repo. So now it is cloned successfully, 100% completed. So as soon as you clone the repository, if I just go back and see your project, this project, the repository already coming to your local workspace. So if I just open it, there is a my file which is available. Okay, so this is your local repository. So once you clone the repository, for example, I got my own copy of my remote repository into local repository. Now I want to do some changes in the file, or I want to add some more files. So whatever work you want to do, you can do it in your local machine. So let me just do some work on this. So let me just connect to my local. I already cloned it. So as soon as you cloned it, you got this particular folder. Test repo is your repository folder or project folder. Let me just shift to that cd get or git cd test repo. Okay, so now I enter into the test repo. So this is our repository. So clear it. So here, this is your working directory. So in this, I just create a new files, or I can just modify the existing file. If you want to do anything, you can do that. So let me just modify the existing file. So what is the file we have here is, if I just ls, which will show you my file. And what is the content of the file? You can say cat my file. So this will show you the content which is available in the file. So let me just modify the content. How we can modify? You can say vi, or we can use vim command. Vim, I say my file. As soon as you open the file, and here you can modify the file. So insert, and here my name is Pavan and I'm from Chennai. So I'm just changing the a single line, and then escape and WQ. Now I have saved the file. So I modified some text. I have modified it. So again, I'll create a new file also. Let me create one more file. I'll say vim my file 2, vim my file 2. So here also I'm adding something. So I'm adding, let's say I'm working as working as a developer. Okay, now I'm writing some text. Now semicolon, save it. So now what I have done in my local repository and the local workspace, I have modified the existing file and also I created a new file. But these two changes we have not committed yet. So those changes are not part of your local repository and also remote repository. So what's the next thing we have to do is we have to add these changes into staging, and then we have to commit those files. So how we can do that? You can simply use git add command. You can say git add. When I say dot, all the changes will be added to your staging. So once you have done, then again git commit -m, and here updated files. I'm just writing a simple commit message. So with this command, what I have done, we have done two insertions into local repository. And if you want to see how many commits we have done, we can say simp git log -one line. So this will show you log. So currently we have done only one commit from my local repository. So now we have done changes in one file and we have added a new file, but these changes are not part of your remote repository. But just look at the remote repository, still I have only one file here. So I want to push my files into remote repository now. So as soon as you done changes here, they are there in the local repository. Now we need to push those. So previously we have cloned the project and we have done modifications. We have added a new file and committed them into local repository. So now we need to push that code into remote repository. How we can push it? We have to execute command called git push. Git push is a command. Now let me do that. So how we can push it? We can execute here. Let me just clear. So I say git push. Git push is a command. And where we need to push origin, and we need to specify the branch. So by default in the Git repository, by default you can see master branch, or you can say main branch. So here the current name of the branch is main. Sometimes you can see the master branch. Recently it has got changed here, main or master branch. So default is a master branch. So here from the git push origin, so we need to specify in which branch you want to push this code. So I'll specify the branch name, git push origin main. If it is a master branch, you have to specify the master branch. Now, as soon as you executed this command, your changes will be pushed to your remote repositories. Now, once it is done, now go back to the remote repository and refresh your page. So now we can see one file. When I open the first file, the data is modified. This is a new file which is modified. And if I just open the second one, this is a new file which is created. So this is how we can do modifications, or we can do new additions into your local repositories. Then we can push them into a remote repository. Now we have successfully pushed them to remote repository. So we have seen git clone and git push. Now what about the git pull command? And what is the difference between git clone and git pull? So git clone means what? We don't have any local repository. Based on the remote repository, we will clone it. That means we will create a local repository based on the remote repository. So we'll get a copy of the remote repository into local repository. So that's the git clone command. But git pull, what this will do is we already have some repository locally, but there are no changes. There are some new changes are there in my remote repository. If you want to get only those changes, we use git pull command. So for example, in the remote repository, let us say I'm trying to modify the second file. So open the my file 2 and let me just edit this file. Okay, so previously I have only one line code we have. So now I'm doing few changes here and then save the file. Come down and you can commit changes. So now the second file is got modified, right, in the remote repository. But if I just look at the local repository, still the second file is having only the single line content. If I just display cat my file 2, when I open this, still one line is there. So the new changes are there in the remote repositories, but those changes are not there in your local workspace. So we need to pull those changes. How we can pull those changes? Again, we have to execute one command, git pull origin, and in which branch you want to pull those changes. Currently in the git, which branch you are maintaining? Master branch. So I can simply say master. and this command will pull all the changes. So for could not find the remote reference master. So main branch we have to specify. If the master is not having, so git pull origin main. So because in the remote repository, we don't have a master branch, we have a main branch. So specify the main, git pull origin main. So this command will pull all the changes into your local repository. Now observe this carefully. So let me print the data about my file 2. So now we can see all 4 lines of code, you got it. Okay, so this is how we can just use clone, pull and push commands using git prompt or git bash. So GitHub is basically a remote repository, which is a service which is provided where we can maintain all the repositories globally. And whenever you want to do some changes in the remote repository, we can do changes. And through git bash, we can execute these commands: git clone, git pull, git push. So these are the commands which we can use with Git and GitHub. So in the next video, we will see how we can work with the same commands through UI, especially when you're working with the IDEs. We don't work with this command prompts. We don't need to execute these commands, especially when you're working with Eclipse or IntelliJ. So how we can do this git clone, git pull, git push, all these commands, how we can execute through UI, especially in IDEs, that we will see in the next video. Okay, so that's all for this video, guys. So thanks for watching.